What is going on, guys? Today I have a very special video for you. We are going over a stock that I do not personally own, but it is a huge stock, and that is Amazon stock. So we're going to take a look at something that's kind of interesting, and honestly, to me, it's just confusing. And maybe you guys run into a similar situation, but we're going to take a look at a lot of the PE ratios, everything that's going on with Amazon in terms of the PE ratios. We're going to take a look at, projected earnings over the next year, what's going on with those numbers, and then finally, we're going to look at a price target for Amazon stock. So if you like the video, make sure you drop a like down below. And if you want to see more videos like this one, make sure you hit that sub button. We're going to start off by looking at Amazon's chart. And this stock is down over 35% in the last 6 months. The last time I made a video on this was actually May 1st. And basically that was after this big drop. And I talked about how I was considering adding an Amazon position because it was a very interesting stock. And since then it's moved even lower. So the question is, am I even more interested in the stock now? And that's kind of what we're going to get into in this video. But basically, everything's just gotten worse and beaten down, and the market's gotten worse. And we've seen a lot of, we've seen this upturn in the market in here, and then kind of things going back down as, interest rate concerns and things have kind of adjusted over time. So Amazon, just like the rest of the market, has just continued to get beaten up. But what we'll see is over the last year, we actually have a 52-week high that's basically about a year ago, and that was around $188.65. So from its current price target, it's about an 80% return if it were to reach, go back to all-time highs. So as I mentioned, we're taking a look at PE ratios in this video, and it's very interesting. So right here, we have a PE ratio of 52.98. And if we go over here to a different website, we can see that they talk about having a PE ratio as of July 1st of 39.91. And then on this same website, if we actually go down and look at what's listed here as July 1st, we have a 52.85, which again is different than the 39 on the same website. And now if we jump over here, so this is Yahoo Finance, Amazon stock again, we have a trailing PE ratio of 54, a forward PE ratio of 68.49. So again, all these numbers so far have been different. And it's just very interesting, and it's hard to find, because if you look at like this number, right, if you're looking at the 68.49, then you're saying that Amazon's basically probably fairly valued. But if you jump back over to this website and you're looking at it as basically a 40 PE ratio here, that's listed here, then you're probably thinking a little bit more like, hey, this stock is probably kind of undervalued and it wouldn't be a bad idea to pick up some shares. And the reason I say 40 for an Amazon stock is undervalued, or at least gives the perception of undervalued, is if we look at this website, so we're looking at macro trends, they have a PE ratio basically trended over time. And we can see that, back in 2020, the PE ratio got as high as 106. And then kind of, settled off as things as the market adjusted. This is actually March. So this is when, or leading out of March. So when the price kind of dropped, the PE ratio kind of shot up as people were projecting, the market was going to downturn. And then as things actually got better, the earnings came up, the PE ratio actually fell because the stock price went up, but also the earnings went up by a significant amount. So overall, the stock had a good year. And now we're kind of back into these levels, but it's a whole different environment. So the stock has completely dropped off, and it's a different environment than what we have seen previously. But if we stretch this out, we can see that Amazon has kind of sat around that like 80, 75 to like 100 mark for the last few years. So if you were able to pick it up at a PE ratio of 40, that would actually seem like a good deal. So with all this confusion, we're going to take a look specifically at this Yahoo one. So a lot of people use Yahoo Finance to look at all their data. They have good statistics and overall, relatively good platform. But what we're going to take a look at, like I mentioned, so we have the the trailing PE ratio, which is 54.62. And then we have the forward PE ratio, which is 68.49. So what the forward P ratio is looking at is what is the projection for forward earnings, and where basically based off the current price, where does that P ratio come in? right? So we're saying that over the year of 2022, we're projecting that earnings are going to be X number of dollars. And right now the price is this, which is 109 basically. So we take 109 divided by those projected earnings X, and we'll get the PE ratio. So we're going to do that right now using Yahoo Finance. And this is where you have to be very careful, because what we're seeing here, they also have their own earnings basically based off analysts. And you have 44 analysts projecting what this year's earnings are going to be. So overall, a very large base to look at. And that the more numbers you have, law of large numbers, you'll get a more accurate basically representation. So what we have here is basically the average estimate, we have the low estimate, and then we have the high estimate. So if we take the average estimate, so like I said, we have 109 is the current price, and we divide by the average estimate, so 0.74 cents, which would be very terrible. So if they have a really, really poor year, the PE ratio that we're seeing right now is actually more equivalent to almost 150, which is very, very high, even for an Amazon stock that recently has only been at, a 75. That would be double basically its 75 PE ratio, which again is kind of insane to think about. So let's take that back now and look at basically the high. I'm not going to spend time looking at the low. I think the low is kind of overblown. The only way we'd get, I think Amazon would be that low, is if they just still invested heavy in a lot of their businesses and basically tried to treat this as a down year and actually basically push the stock lower, would be my guess, is basically the only way that they would end up having a negative year like that. So we'll take a look at the high estimate, which is $1.71. So again, 109 divided by $1.71. So this is a 63. So they are looking at basically the rest of 2020 plus the first couple quarters of 2023 to get their PE ratio in here of around 68. So they're kind of doing something interesting in there, where they're actually posting, not the average and not the low, not the high. They're doing kind of somewhere in between. I would think that they would always kind of stick to the average, but at the same time, if they posted that average, that would scare people. The other thing that you have to remember is, right, they have 44 analysts here that are covering the stock. And basically the analyst boards are different across different platforms. These aren't all the same analysts. They're all different, basically different people who are looking at it, who report numbers into different websites, whatever it may be. So if we jump over here, we can see, right, this is the NASDAQ website, and they have a whole different, basically, number set in here. So they have only 11 analysts covering the stock, so number of estimates, 11 people basically put in their estimates, and their bottom, their consensus is actually $1.17, which is 40 cents higher than where Yahoo's is at. And then their high is $2.18, which again is higher than where Yahoo Finance is at. And then their low is also higher than Yahoo Finance at 40 cents. So it's very interesting, and you have to pay a lot of attention to this and see who you trust and also make your own opinion, because even these websites, they're not consistent across. You look at PE ratios, if you're going to look at them, find a site where you're comfortable with. And then the other thing that's also important, I would always try and find larger numbers when you're looking at analysts. So they only have 11 on here, analysts covering the stock, where, as I mentioned, there's 44 covering it on Yahoo Finance. The more large numbers that you get, the more people that you're going to have on both sides of the coin. You have people who are very negative about the stock or have some negative perception of it, and then you have people who are overly positive about the stock. And over larger numbers, those tend to equal out. I did want to throw this little tidbit in here. So Amazon is a stock that hasn't, just always gone up in a straight line. If you look at the chart, you might think that, but they've had a number of periods where they've dropped by over 50%. So April of 1999 to August of 1999, they dropped by almost 60%. In December of 1999 to September of 2001, they dropped by 94%, which is absolutely insane. And then October 2003 to August of 2006, they dropped by, again, almost 60% there. And then in the Great Recession, so December of 2007 to November of 2008, they dropped by 60% as well. So right now they're down by, around that 50% mark. We can jump back over here and look at the last year. It says they're down by almost 40%. So they have, just 10% more to run before they'd be kind of in some of these category numbers. But it's not unreasonable to think of a stock even like Amazon with where they're at, especially if we head into a recession, to drop even lower. With that said, I would say overall I am bullish on the stock. The question for me is my money worth putting in Amazon for the long term or even the short term, or are there better deals out there? And kind of, I guess my opinion on this is that Amazon there's a lot of question marks with kind of what's going to happen with, a recession, where their earnings will be at, everything like that. I am very much interested in the stock, but I'd be really, really happy to pick it up like under $100, somewhere in like the low 90s. I would be absolutely thrilled if it kind of got down into there. Then I would probably start building out a position and then build it out over time as it either drops lower, or even if it comes back up a little bit, keep adding to the position just a little less. So analysts kind of have it's hard to not be bullish on Amazon. So analysts, we have a bunch that are with 41, they're giving it a buy rating here on the Wall Street Journal markets. And then we have 6 that are overweight. We have 2 that are hold, and then you're always going to have a couple negative Nancy's. So we have 2 people down here saying that Amazon is a sell. Very interesting. So what we have as well, as I mentioned in the intro, we're going to take a look at these price targets. So we have 215 for a high price target, 175 for a median, and then a low of 107. So it's very interesting because we're just a couple dollars above the low. So they're kind of projecting that Amazon could trade sideways for a year. I could easily see that happening. I'm kind of surprised this low actually isn't lower. I would kind of almost expect someone to be like in the 80s, especially with 2 people saying that there's a sell. So it's kind of surprising that this is only 107. But a lot of these bigger cap stocks, people tend to be overly positive on, right? They've only gone up over, for most of their lifetime, or recent lifetime. So people tend to have that recency bias, and they don't really project that, hey, these stocks could drop even more. So with that said, that's kind of how I'm treating Amazon. I want to see it go lower, I wouldn't say I want to see it go lower because I know that affects other people's portfolios. But for me personally, to get into the stock, I would love to see it go lower before I add a position. If it bounces back up, that's honestly going to be a good thing, because overall then that probably means the market is bouncing up. But for me to really add heavy and get an Amazon position started, I'd have to see it probably in the 90s, low 90s is kind of what I'm thinking. So overall, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure you drop a like down below. And if you want to see more videos like this one, make sure you hit that sub button. And as always, have a wonderful rest of your day.